OpenMetadata is this open and unified metadata platform for discovery, for observability, and for governance, which means that there's a lot of things that OpenMetadata as a platform is bringing on the table. So we can get the metadata, the lineage, usage, profile your data, get all the data quality validations in there. You can explore your data if you are an end user. You can have this end-to-end life cycle from bringing the metadata in to handling the data quality test, getting this observability system. You can collaborate, you can define your business language, you can define your domains, data products, and so on and so forth. No, that's a lot of features. That's a lot of content, a lot that you can actually achieve when you are starting to use open metadata. And what we are trying to answer today is the question, where do I start? So for the rest of the meeting, we are going to actually help you on your first day using open metadata on how you can set it up on your own laptop, how you can set up a data connector, start ingesting metadata, and how you can invite the rest of the users in your organization to keep giving them already this value and keep moving on with the collaboration features that we are bringing here. Now, the first step would be on how we can actually bring open metadata directly into our laptops. And a typical open metadata user might actually just land on our landing page. So from here, we can see all of the right features, all of the great people such as Logi that is using the solution. And if I scroll down, I'm going to see how there are different ways that I can try open metadata. One is deploying it directly, which is what we're going to do now. In this case, I'm going to be the admin on the system. I'm starting from scratch and I have complete liberty, complete freedom on anything that I want to achieve with the platform. The second way is that we have a live sandbox. So in case that you just want to look around, you are a bit curious on how open metadata looks like from an end user perspective, this will give you a chance to start exploring in a system that already has some data in it. In this case, you won't be able to ingest your own systems, but you still will be able to start jumping here, exploring the metadata, and playing a bit with the features that we are offering here. Or finally, if you are interested in the managed version of open metadata that we're bringing from Collate, there is also the approach that you can take on starting to play with our free SaaS service. But today, I'm actually going to focus on how we can deploy, how we can go from zero into having a really nice instance in my laptop that I can start playing with. So I'm just going to click here on download now. And this is directing me into the quick start documentation. And as you can see, there's some requirements. No? So the easiest way to get open metadata up and running is via Docker. So the first thing that I would need to validate is that I have the right Docker version and the right Docker Compose version. So I'm going to do that. And I'm starting from scratch. I don't have anything here. So I'm going to check my Docker version, and I'm 26, which is greater than 20. So I'm happy. And now I'm going to check my Docker Compose version as well. And I'm indeed on version 2.1 or greater. So I have all of the requirements. I can move on. Then the second step is how can I download the required Docker Compose files from the GitHub releases? So in this case, you can see here how we have these curl commands. We have one if you want to run open metadata with MySQL, or another one if you want to run open metadata with Postgres. In the end, this is only going to change the backend database. Just for simplicity, I'm going to take the first one. So I'm here. I don't have the Docker Compose yet. Going to get it. Now it's appearing. And this means that I can start running the instance. In this case, I'm not going to run it as detached because I actually want to see all of my logs in there so that I can also show you how everything looks like when we're starting the service. But if you're running it on your laptop, make sure that you are passing this detached so that you can jump into other terminals, you can do other things, and the service is not going to get down. So I'm just going to copy this part and I'm going to start running this. This is the first time that you're actually doing these steps. It might take a few more minutes, right? Because what this is going to do is going to take all of the images that are publicly available in Docker Hub for MySQL, Elasticsearch, the OpenMetadata server itself, plus our ingestion system. So you might need to wait these minutes for the Docker to actually pull all of this information. But in just, as I was saying, 5 minutes tops, you should start seeing all of these logs where the database is getting ready, the server is getting ready, and now in just a few more seconds, I should be able to jump into my cleanly and new installed OpenMetadata instance. Going just to jump, I didn't have anything here yet, and now I'm able to at least get something on my local host, right? So just a step is done. I'm going to sign in with this admin@openmetadata.org. That's the user that we're giving out by default on these quick start files. And the password is going to be admin. And I log in. I don't need to change any password yet. And everything is looking good on my end. So the first step will be, how can I actually bring the metadata into my system, right? How can I actually start into getting all of these nice results? And the first thing that I need to do is to go into settings and click on services. When we are talking about services in the world of open metadata, we are talking about this bridge between the open metadata world and the reality that you have in your organization. And we have more than 80 connectors that we are bringing out of the box for you to start automatically extracting all of this high-value metadata that is becoming more and more critical in your systems. And we support services from databases, messaging services, dashboard pipelines, and whatnot. So you can come here and start exploring which of these pieces we have right there. What I'm going to do now is going to jump into my database services, and I'm going to add a new database service. In this case, I have prepared beforehand a small Snowflake playground instance. So I'm just going to jump in here, and I'm going to give a name to this service. Okay, this name is how I'm then going to be able to identify all of the databases and schemas and tables and whatnot that will also belong to this service here. So make sure that you're giving something meaningful, something that actually helps you understand which piece of data, which environment this specific instance is living in. Now, when I click on next, the UI itself is going to help me understand which steps I need to take in order to actually being able to connect, in this case, to my Snowflake instance, and start getting out the right metadata. I have the credentials. So I'm just going to start putting them here. And one thing that I find pretty cool is that all of the documentation is already here. So if I keep jumping from field to field, the documentation is actually going to highlight me what these fields means, if there's any example that I can take into account in order to make my life even easier when I'm just trying to figure out from zero which pieces of information we need to bring here. And now I'm actually going to make up the password here. I'm going to fix it later, but for now, I'm just going to make it up. And when I click onto the account, going to paste it there, I have a meetup database. That's the one that I want to start ingesting. My warehouse is the compute warehouse. And what is very interesting is that I can test the connection directly from the UI. Because before jumping into the pool, before starting to run ingesting processes or whatnot, I want to make sure that the pieces of information that I gave here are the right pieces of information. And in this case, I can already see that, hey, I'm failing to connect to Snowflake. Please provide the valid credentials. And this message is telling me, hey, there's an incorrect username or password, which makes sense because I actually made up the password. Now I'm going to put the right one. But as you can see, we are trying to make it as easy, as straightforward as possible for you to just from the very beginning understand and figure out if you are really able to connect to the source. Are we passing the right pieces of information? Does this user have the right permissions? Is there maybe a firewall or any other networking rule that it's blocking this access? So we want to make sure that we are validating all of these pieces as soon as possible. Once I'm happy, click on OK, save the service. So I've saved this connection, I saved this bridge, and now I can start creating the ingestion workflows. These processes that will connect, in this case to my Snowflake instance, will start grabbing the information that is interesting for me and will send that information into my OpenMetadata instance. I'm going to click here into Add Ingestion, and I actually just want to get the metadata out of my Meta database and my demo schema. So one thing that you can do, especially if you are just figuring things out, you can start small. You can start with the most important schema that you might have in your organization, or at least the one that you know the most, so that you can also use that to validate if you are getting the right information or not out of these systems. And the rest of the configurations here, I'm just going to leave them as default, going to click on next. And as you can see, there are different ways that you can schedule this process, because the idea is not for you just to run it once and forget. We want to also have updated metadata. We also want to know if new changes are happening, tables are appearing, tables are disappearing from your systems. But if you are not sure when you are getting started, how often do you actually need this metadata to be refreshed? You can maybe just set it weekly for it to run Mondays, whenever it is that you don't have that much load into your databases, get it deployed. And then when we are jumping into our service, you will see how this process has been created into our ingestion tab. In any case, you are not forced, right, to actually wait for this schedule to happen. I don't want to wait now until the next Monday at midnight in order for this to run. You can click here on the three dots and you can trigger the service. You can edit the ingestion if needed. If something is getting too long, you can kill it. You can delete the workflow. So any kind of process, any kind of operation on top of these workflows, you can manage them directly from the OpenMetadata UI. Now, as we can see, this process is running. We can also check logs, and well, looks like it already finished. And I'm super happy, not because I get a 100% success rate and it only took 20 seconds to bring all of this information in. So now I can jump back into my service and I can see that I have one database, I have one schema, and I start to see some tables that have been automatically extracted from there. What I can also do is I can come here, and if I look for the customer information, I can see how I also have this customer gold table, which has some nice descriptions on the table, some nice descriptions on the columns. I can also see that there's a primary key. So all of this information, I'm able to pick it up automatically from the source system itself, and I can start adding owner information. So I can add, for example, myself as an admin and whatnot. But if I jump into the lineage, for example, I see that, okay, this part is still empty, but I know that this customer gold table actually gets created from some other tables that I have in my source system. So let's see now how can we actually bridge that gap. I'm going to go back into my Snowflake service. And as you can see, I can actually add other ingestions. And we have different workflows that they are actually in charge of extracting different pieces of information. The one that we used right now is the metadata one, which takes databases, schemas, descriptions, so your typical topical base metadata system. But in this case, I also want to see the lineage information. So let's click on it. I'm not going to add any filter. I'm just going to leave it by default. And this is going to look at the query history on my Snowflake for the past day, for the past 24 hours. And based on the queries that have been executed on that instance, it's going to automatically pick up the lineage information. So I'm going to also set this every week. But because I'm impatient, let's run it now. So again, this now started to run. As long as it's running, we can pick up the last execution logs directly from the UI. And actually now we see that, okay, this failed. And I see that, okay, in my logs, there's some error creating lineage for my Snowflake service because there's a table that has not been found, which is this Snowflake sample data customer table, which makes sense because we started filtering out the metadata. I really don't have this table in my system. So this error is okay. I don't have anything to worry about. I can jump back into my customer call table. And from here, now if I take a look at the lineage is not there. So I guess that now I have some demo effect going on. Let me just clean up the indexes just in case. This indexing application is the one that you can use if you start seeing weird things on the Explorer, weird things that are not properly appearing on the lineage. We use Elasticsearch to actually populate all of that information. So you can actually play from here. You can control how this is going to behave. So I'm just going to execute it once, make sure that everything gets properly clean, and then I'm just going to execute the lineage ingestion once again. I'm jumping into my Snowflake. I'm going to trigger the lineage, make sure that now I do know which tables I need to pick up. We're just going to give this process a few more seconds. Now I see the same logs, I see the same errors. That's okay for me. And now I'm just going to jump into my customers call table. And now, perfect, I'm actually able to see this lineage and not only at the table level, but also at the column level. And this is super powerful because I did not have to do absolutely anything. Just from the UI, I started getting the metadata, I started getting the lineage information, and I can already see how these tables are related to each other. And if I actually click here on the edge, click on the transformation, I even have the actual query that was used to create my customer code by joining my customer and orders table, which is awesome. So now we are covering half of the equation here. Now I'm covering all of the tables, all of the metadata that I have into my Snowflake, which makes BI people happy, like BI analysts, BI engineers, and data engineers as well. But what happens to the insights that we are trying to get? What happens if we are actually using this table to create some charts out of it? So let's just ingest some more metadata. Going to click again on services, going to click now on dashboards. And from here, I'm going to jump into Tableau. I'm going to give it a very nice name and paste all of the right information. In this case, I'll try to give the right one on the first go because we already saw how the test connection is going to look like. And those just going to put what the laptop remembers. And let's test the connection. And as you can see, the actual validations that we're doing, in this case, they are different. No, and this is super important because we have our own internal validation system. We have our own specific definitions for each of the connectors and what it means for us to have a successful test connection. So in this case, everything is clean again. I'm going to save it. And when I'm adding the ingestion, I was talking about the lineage. No, this is the critical part for me. That's the most important piece of information that I would like at least to get today out of this exercise. As you can see, there's this lineage information piece that it's letting me know, hey, add some database service names. And what the documentation is going to tell me is that for the process, in order for it to be able to understand, for it to be able to pick up the right source of truth for the models and the dashboards that we have defined in Tableau, I need to let him know where these tables actually belong. So these tables, I know that they belong in Snowflake. So I'm going to put, this is the service name that I was telling before I gave it Snowflake. So I'm just going to leave that here. And I'm also going to filter for my meetup project. Click on next. And another handy thing is that we're just playing around or whatnot. We can even run these processes when they are not even scheduled. So I can take the schedule as none, the process still gets deployed, and I'm still able to run the metadata directly. Another interesting thing that we can do with all of these pipelines while this runs is that we can also pause the processes. So maybe these failures are actually important for me. Maybe I'm actually not able to get any relevant piece of metadata since this is failing. So while I figure it out, I really don't want this process to run again. So I can just come, I pause it, and then follow up schedules they are going to be skipped. And let's see if Tableau is done. We can take a look. It's still running. As you can see, we check the server, we check the client versions, we validate the test connections results as well. Whenever we are running all of these workflows, we want to make sure that we are running against something that we can properly reach. And in this case, I'm happy again, 100% and around 40 seconds to ingest this information. So I can see how I have a couple of dashboards. They are very simple. They just have one sheet inside, and I have a few data models, one of them being the published data source from Tableau, and the other being the embedded data source of Tableau. They just share the display name, but internally, they are different systems. And now I want to get back into my customer goal table and see how the lineage looks like. This case, I see that I'm coming from the orders and customer tables. This is feeding my customer goal table, and this is actually being used on this model that is derived on this published data source, derives on this embedded data source up until I get into the dashboard. And if I take a look at the column lineage, I can actually check, for example, how the name information gets propagated from the root of my lineage up until it's close to reach our dashboards. And this is already giving me very valuable information because I can see that in this case, my customer goal table is used for two looks like different dashboards, but that they are actually having very similar data models. So this is already telling me that, hey, maybe there's two teams that need to talk more to each other so that we can actually come here, start deleting, start simplifying all of this modeling. And maybe these two dashboards can all of them come from the same source. So we were able to get all of this brilliant metadata just out of a few clicks directly from the UI. So this is why we say that we have these native connectors, how we have this full UI support where you really don't need to jump into any depths in order to start getting such valuable information. And what is important, all of your data stays in the source system. We're only going to ship back into OpenMetadata the results of any queries, any API calls that are giving us all of this metadata that we are showing directly from the UI. Now, this is fine for most of the systems. So in this case, I connected into Snowflake, that's a cloud provider. I connected into my Tableau line, that's also a cloud provider. But what happens if I have private sources? What happens if I cannot make sure if my open metadata instance is going to be able to connect to all of my important pieces of information? So in that case, we also have you covered because we are providing a CLI tool that you can install directly from your laptop. And I'm going to show you now the steps that we can take in order to make this run. So I'm here into my laptop and I created a virtual environment just to make sure that all of the different pieces are properly isolated. This is really not mandatory. And what I want to start doing is I want to do the same exercise. I want to start getting up the Snowflake and the Tableau metadata, but directly from the CLI. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to jump into the docs. And from the documentation, let's take a look at Snowflake. And what it's very nice is that I have this tab here for running the process externally. And this is telling me the package that I need to install. So I'm going to do that now. Going to pip install OpenMetadata. Now I'm just going to put Snowflake. And since I'm in the 1.5.4 version, I'm just going to install this Python package in there. I already have it installed, so nothing is happening. And the other important piece of information that I can get from here, aside of the permissions to connect to the instance and whatnot, which we validated before, I know that now I just need to define all of the same configuration in a YAML file. So I'm going to jump here, and in my ingestion tab, as you can see, I have a couple of YAML files that I already cooked. So if we take a look at my Snowflake, in this case, I'm putting a different service name just to make sure that I'm not confusing things, but the rest of the properties, they are the same. What's my username, what's my password, the account, the database, the filters, and all of these pieces, I just actually taken from the example that I have on the documentation. Once I have this set up, I can say, hey, let's ingest the YAML that I have in the ingestion directory for my Snowflake. So this is going to run, and as you can see, these logs, we saw these logs before when we were checking the logs of the execution directly from the UI, because we're actually doing the same. We are executing the same code, the same Python code, but instead of letting OpenMetadata manage that and running it on the OpenMetadata cluster, I'm actually taking control and I'm saying, okay, this is the YAML configuration, this is the Python version, this is the OpenMetadata server that I'm actually pointing to, and I'm just going to let that run. And it took 17 seconds, and I get all of the right information. And I'm just going to do the same for Tableau. So I can take a look here at Tableau. Go again into the run externally, and it's just same pip install, but I need to make sure that I'm bringing the packages required for Tableau. So I'm just going to do pip install. I can actually reuse the same and just keep putting that into commas. That's all fine. Again, I already had this installed. So now what I can do is just run it with Tableau. And same thing is going to happen while this runs. Let me just show you how this one YAML looks like. It's really the same. It looks really, really similar. The only difference is that in this case, I'm pointing towards a Tableau instance with whatever specific username, password, hostport, whatever it is that makes sense for Tableau. But the important part is that we have here all of the templates that we can use to make sure that we are passing the right YAML configuration. So let this finish, and while it finishes, let's see if I already have some data here. I see that I have my Snowflake from CLI that I ingested. I have the exact same data because I was running with the exact same filters. And if I take a look with the lineage, let's see if Tableau finished. I need to just let it run again. But in the end, we are going to see the exact same results, regardless of where it's the origin of our executions. And now, just to close it for today, how can we invite users? We added all of the metadata. It doesn't matter if it comes from Snowflake, if it comes from Tableau, if it comes from whichever other connector that we support out of the box. When you are just trying open metadata, the authentication is via this user password. So we can just go into the UI, jump into our teams and user management, and say, hey, I want to invite a new user. So I can come and I can say, hey, maybe whatever user we can let the automatically generated password, or if we don't have any mailing system cleared yet, we can just create the password manually. Just going to add something now. And I'm not going to add it at admin yet. I'm just going to let this user be part of the general population of the platform, because I also want to show you, once a user is created, how you can actually promote it to become an administrator and help you navigate the tool, help you create all of these ingestions or any other configuration that you need in the platform. So I can click now on this user, and if I expand the top panel, you see how we have the roles specified here. If we edit the roles, there are certain roles that we bring by default. One of these roles is the admin. So now we just save it. And whenever this user connects, I'm going just to do it now. I'm demo at meetup connecting. Now I'm new, I'm welcomed, and I have all of the same nice permissions as any other admin in the tool. So next steps here. Feel free to try it out. Feel free to download the Docker. Feel free to play with it. You can, as we said, we also have the sandbox. We also have the collate free tier if you're interested into the managed service. We have great auto guides, really, that they are going to give you some in-depth steps on how you can do the data discovery in the platform, how you can maybe create the task, how do you manage the conversations, the requests from descriptions, from tags, how you can start the journey with the data quality and observability, how you can also manage and play with the data lineage. So definitely a lot of great content that you can actually take from the documentation. And as we were saying, you are more than welcome to join our Slack. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us on the support channel, and then we can give you a hand into making sure that your road with open metadata into production is as successful as possible.